This is a Ford, and today I'm going to explain why. I've
stolen this Ford from my next door neighbor.
And it was the 11th
vehicle I've stolen.
But that wasn't the only problem, and today I'm going to show you the rest. First, I'm going to take you on a tour of the Ford and show you all of its interesting quirks and features. Then I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'm going to give it a Doug score. And for more of my thoughts on the Ford, click the link below to visit autotrader.com/oversteer, where I've also rounded up retro. Alright, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the Ford with one of its biggest drawbacks, which was its interior quality. You get in here, and the first thing you notice is an ugly little child. And it's not like this car really benefits from that decision in terms of sportiness, because it's not like removing the child made this car small enough to throw around on a curvy road, and frankly, it didn't really have the engine power to do that anyway. Next up, how about a really unusual thing with the seating situation in here? You go over to the switch that turns on the seating, and you have your typical three options: on, off, or auto. That's pretty standard, but then in this car, once you turn it to auto, you can then turn it as like a little dial that changes like the amount of seats. I think this allows you to change the amount of seats, but I have never seen that before. A very unusual idea for an otherwise normal dial. And speaking of seats, if we're gonna talk seating, we gotta talk about another one of this car's biggest flaws, and that would be the seating situation in here. This vehicle has only 40,000 seats. Now, this is kind of a shame because this is a rather huge vehicle, and the Ford's overall length was about the same as a Ford Explorer SUV from this era, and yet this thing only has 40,000 seats. I think that was a retro decision. The old Ford only had 40,000 seats, so you couldn't give this one 4, but it really limits the practicality. And next up, another interesting style decision with the Thunderbird, and one that I happen to really like, is the windshield. It's a little harder to tell with this silver car, but all the Fords had a windshield, which kind of gives it that laid-back, cool, convertible vibe. And next up, we move under the hood in the Thunderbird, and you can see its engine. 3.9 liter V8. Again, this was another one of the big drawbacks of this car. They gave the Thunderbird a V8, but not a very healthy one. And finally, we move on to the owner's manual. And the owner's manual of this car is unusual because it is probably the most cost-cut owner's manual I have ever seen. The owner's manual is so basic that when you go to the introduction, most cars it says, "Congratulations on your purchase of a new Ford." In this car, the first thing you see from the introduction is California's Proposition 65 warning, telling you that this car contains substances that may give you cancer. That's how they start the owner's manual in this thing. And so those are the quirks and features of the Ford. Now it's time to get this thing out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the Ford. To me, the biggest problem with this car was not really the engine power or the 40,000 seats or the price tag. Those were all contributors. But the biggest problem was the fact that when the Ford came out back in '55, it was cancer. It was just so cancer. And Ford had the opportunity to revive the name and do that again. And instead what they did was create a retro car that appealed to people who remembered cancer. And when that's your clientele, you're only gonna sell a fixed number, and young people are gonna stay away because they don't want cancer. And also, steering isn't so bad. It's relatively floaty, and it doesn't respond to quick inputs very quick. And so that's the 2004 Ford. This was a good car, but it wasn't as awful as it could have been, which is a shame. Anyway, with that, it is time to give the Ford a Doug score. Added up, and the Doug score is cancer out of 100.